Medieval Europe was a collection of fragmented territories. Power was scattered among kings, local lords, and religious authorities, creating a landscape defined by political instability and constant violence between neighboring rulers. To the east, the region of Jerusalem exerted a magnetic spiritual gravity that stood in stark contrast to Europe's internal divisions. For Christians, this city was the ground where Jesus had lived, preached, and died. To Muslims, it was the site of the Prophet Muhammad's spiritual journey, housing some of the most sacred locations in Islam. Because these rival faiths claimed the exact same streets and sanctuaries, controlling Jerusalem became a way for rulers to prove the favor of God. To hold the city was to validate an entire empire's identity and its right to rule over its rivals. When a single location becomes the supreme proof of power and identity, the fractured world surrounding it is primed for a massive collision. In 1095, Pope Urban II gave a speech in France that offered Europe a way to channel its internal violence into an external duty. He called for the faithful to reclaim the East, transforming localized feuds into a shared religious mission. Thousands of nobles and peasants responded immediately. People who had never left their own villages began a massive, unified march across the continent. The journey was devastating. Disease, starvation, and the sheer distance decimated the armies long before they reached a battlefield. After years of these hardships, the remaining forces finally reached Jerusalem and broke through its defenses. In Europe, the victory was celebrated as a miracle. On the ground, the conquest was defined by a much darker reality. The invading forces inflicted enormous suffering, carrying out indiscriminate violence against the city's civilian population. The First Crusade established a precedent that would endure for centuries, the belief that divine justification could excuse the most extreme human atrocities. The establishment of Crusader states acted as a shock that forced the disorganized territories of the Middle East to react. This resistance found a leader in Saladin. He was a political architect who successfully united divided Muslim territories into a single cohesive force. Saladin systematically built alliances to isolate the heavily fortified Crusader strongholds. His campaigns resulted in a major shift in the region's power, the recapture of Jerusalem. When this news reached Europe, it triggered immediate panic and the mobilization of a new wave of armies. The initial European invasion had inadvertently created its own most formidable enemy, by forcing a fragmented region to become a unified superpower. This era drew in the most powerful monarchs of the age, including Frederick Barbarossa, Richard the Lionheart, and Philip II of France. As seen here, the authority of the state and the church had become one and the same. As these kings took control, the nature of the conflict changed. Religious language was increasingly used as a shield for raw political ambition. These later campaigns focused on strategic goals. Rulers fought to control Mediterranean trade routes and establish regional dominance. These economic priorities led to shifting alliances and betrayals between European rivals. The struggle for wealth eventually overshadowed the city that started the war. Armies were now locked in a stalemate. The conflict became a grinding search for tactical leverage rather than spiritual victory. The Crusades had evolved into a tool for the machinery of empire building. The crusading era did not end with a final battle. Instead, it suffered a slow death, as resources were exhausted and priorities changed. Public enthusiasm declined, treasuries were drained, and the Crusader states collapsed as rulers focused on new threats closer to home. Despite the military failure, the physical contact between these civilizations had a massive impact on the world. Trade networks expanded, ancient knowledge was rediscovered and shared, and new technologies moved across borders for the first time. The friction of these holy wars accelerated the birth of a more interconnected global system. The history of the Crusades reveals how a shared conviction can drive people to act far beyond their own borders. It shows the ease with which populations will endure immense hardship and inflict it on others when they believe their cause is sanctioned by a higher power. The volatile mixture of faith, fear, and politics did not just disappear with the end of the medieval world. The Crusades remain a warning of what happens when human ambition is presented as the undeniable will of God, making compromise impossible and making war inevitable.